Reese Langford arrived at Fort Briar with a toolbox in one hand and a clearance badge clipped to her collar. Her uniform was civilian-colored cargo pants, plain gray shirt, no rank, no patches. A few soldiers paused to glance at her before dismissing her entirely. She wasn't one of them. Probably here to fix wires, take inventory, or file maintenance reports. Gotta love when logistics sends their paperwork in person, a young lieutenant muttered, loud enough for the group to chuckle. Reese didn't react. She simply crossed the yard with quiet purpose, heading for the barracks where the multinational unit was housed. No one offered to help her with the door. Later, someone scrawled "dead weight" in chalk on the corner of the equipment trailer. She passed it, boot steady, not even a blink. They thought she was a burden. What they didn't know was that she'd survived a mission even the general stopped speaking of. Stay with us till the end because the moment the general sees her tattoo, everything shifts. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated. And if you believe in quiet strength, hit subscribe. These are the stories they tried to bury. The first morning at Fort Briar broke sharp and dry, the desert wind dragging grit across the concrete yard like claws. Reese Langford was already on her knees beside the southern comms tower, sleeves rolled up, socket wrench in hand. A humming error alert blinked red on the status panel overhead, faulty uplink, just before the unit's scheduled simulation drill. She tightened the last bolt and flicked the breaker. The hum stopped. The alert vanished. Was it the diagnostics relay? A voice asked from behind. Reese didn't look up. She knew that tone mock interest with a sneer tucked inside. Lieutenant Briggs stood above her, one boot resting casually on a stack of unloaded gear. His crew flanked him, all pressed uniforms and smirking faces. Figures. Civilians messing with military hardware, he added. Hope you didn't void the calibration. Reese stood slowly, brushing dust from her knees. It was a timing loop fault. Left unchecked, it would have jammed your signal halfway through red phase targeting. Briggs blinked. One of his team shifted uncomfortably. Right, he said, forcing a grin. Well, thanks for the translation. They moved on without another word, but Reese caught the quick glance over the shoulder, curious, uneasy. At 900 hours, the simulation began. 2 teams, red and blue. Reese wasn't on either roster. Instead, she stood near the control tent, cross-checking satellite telemetry with a clipboard the size of a lunch tray. Inside the tent, a corporal was slamming his headset against the table. Signals bouncing again, command feeds glitching. The instructor leaned over him. Didn't we get this sorted? Reese stepped forward. It's the relay again. Secondary path still locked to standby. I can reroute. The corporal barely spared her a glance. Who let the tech in? The instructor waved a dismissive hand. Let her try. It's not like we're getting anything now. Reese opened the terminal, fingers dancing over keys with calm precision. In under a minute, the feed snapped back online. Crystal clear comms. The map reloaded. Units flickered into real-time position. A low whistle came from somewhere in the tent. But no thank you followed. The instructor grunted, turned to his screen, and barked new orders into the headset. By noon, the temperature had climbed to 95. Reese walked alone to the mess hall. A few soldiers lounged outside under a shaded awning. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a tattooed forearm, leaned over as she passed. Hey, toolbox, he called. That your rank now? Laughter followed. Reese didn't pause. She entered the dining hall and found a table near the back, setting down her tray without touching the food. Across the room, Lieutenant Briggs sat with his crew. He tapped his fork against his glass and raised his voice. Big thanks to Miss Langford today. If that relay hadn't been repaired, we might have had to improvise. Tragic. More laughter. One of the soldiers mimed twisting a wrench with exaggerated motions. Reese calmly folded her napkin and stood. She returned her tray, untouched, and walked back into the sun. That evening, a note appeared in grease pencil on the side of the comms tower. Still useless without a rifle. Reese stood in front of it for a long moment. Then she opened her toolkit, pulled out a rag, and wiped it away. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. But for the rest of the night, no one else dared to approach the tower. Reese Langford was up before the horn. By 500, she was in the weapons bay, quietly inspecting rifle barrels. She moved with a kind of silence that unsettled the private assigned to monitor inventory. He kept sneaking glances, unsure if she was supposed to be there. By 515, she had stripped down a standard-issue M4, laid its components in order, reassembled it, and tested the bolt action in under a minute. She wasn't showing off. She was just making sure it didn't jam. At 600, the trainees were herded onto the range. Today's exercise, long-range marksmanship support. Reese wasn't on any firing list. Her name wasn't on any list at all. Still, she walked the perimeter, checking wind gauges, noting angles. She paused near the spotting station, and when the lead spotter failed to show, an instructor glanced up. "You," he said, pointing. "Civilian. You see well?" Reese adjusted her glasses. "Well enough." He tossed her a pair of binoculars. "Call the shots. Targets on the southeast ridge. Squad Delta's up." Squad Delta was cocky, loud. They groaned as she stepped into the chair. "Really? The wrench girl?" A shooter named Malik rolled his eyes. "Hope she doesn't ask the target to reboot." The instructor didn't respond, just raised the flag. Reese lifted the binoculars, made a single adjustment to the dial, and said, "Target 1, 700 meters, left shoulder, crosswind west, fire." Crack. The round hit dead center. "Target 2, high ridge, 10 o'clock, fire." Crack. Another direct hit. She spoke with calm, clipped precision calls, 10 shots. All landed. The instructor marked his clipboard, face unreadable. By the time Squad Delta walked off the range, nobody said a word. Except Malik. He stared at her with something close to confusion. "How did you—" Reese handed him the binoculars. "You weren't aiming high enough," she said softly. "You adjusted for distance, not for wind layer shift." He opened his mouth, then shut it. She walked away. Later that afternoon, in the debriefing tent, Lieutenant Briggs leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "Let's be real," he said. "That range score, that's on the shooters." Someone nodded. "She's just reading numbers. Anyone with eyes can do that." "She's logistics," another added. "She's not here to win a war. She's here to check our flashlights." Reese, seated quietly near the back, kept her eyes on the terrain printout in front of her. She was already marking a fault line in the southeast quadrantan area the next drill would cross. When the colonel entered, the room straightened. He strode to the screen and brought up the shooting report. 10 targets, 10 shots, no misses, 0 delay. He glanced at the back of the room. At her. "She gave the calls?" The instructor nodded once. "Yes, sir." The colonel paused. "I've only seen calls that clean once," he said. "In Helmand, 2014. Nobody spoke. But one of the younger officers, a quiet woman named Ochoa, looked over at Reese with a flicker of something new in her eyes. That night, Reese sat beneath the busted awning behind the mess hall, wrapping a tool handle with new grip tape. Briggs passed by, muttering something under his breath. But behind him, Malik paused. He didn't say anything, just gave her a nod. And Reese, without smiling, nodded back. The tactical operations room was cramped, hot, and stank faintly of rubber mats and stale coffee. A dozen officers clustered around a folding table, littered with terrain maps, plastic unit tokens, and dry erase markers. Reese Langford stood quietly along the wall, arms folded, clipboard against her chest. She hadn't been invited, but no one had told her to leave. The exercise briefing had stalled. A simulated convoy route was being reviewed. Team Alpha would attempt an escort run through a narrow canyon, while Red Team set up theoretical ambush points. The room buzzed with confident voices, half-serious jokes, and an edge of impatience. "It's a straight run," Lieutenant Briggs said, tapping a marker against the map. "Red won't expect us to push the ridge road. We'll break through before they can reposition." A few heads nodded. Someone murmured, "Solid." Reese shifted her weight, spoke once. "You'll be in a kill box by minute 4. The room stilled. Briggs turned. "Excuse me?" Reese stepped forward, laid her clipboard on the table. With calm precision, she marked a few subtle curves on the topographic overlay. Ridge folds, line-of-sight pockets. A dry culvert running parallel to the main canyon. "They'll set mortar coverage here and here. Cut your movement in half. If they place a fire team with elevation at the northwest crest," she tapped twice, "you'll have no exit." Silence stretched. Then the instructor leaned over. He studied the markings, compared them to his own projection file. He looked up. She's right. Briggs let out a thin laugh. Yeah? And where'd she learn that? Watching replays of war documentaries? The instructor didn't answer. He erased the current plan, drew up Reese's. The exercise began 2 hours later. Simulated teams moved across terrain dotted with sensors, motion beacons, and remote-triggered smoke markers. Briggs' team made it through without a single casualty. No one spoke as they returned. In the evening, Reese found her way to the edge of the airstrip, watching the horizon turn gold. A breeze pulled at her sleeves. Behind her, someone approached. Quiet steps. It was Lieutenant Ochoa. I saw what you marked on the map, she said. I wouldn't have caught that terrain fold, not from a printout. Reese didn't turn. I spent a lot of time with topography, she said softly, in places where the wrong bend gets you surrounded. Ochoa hesitated. You were a soldier. Reese didn't answer. But after a long pause, she added, I learned from people who didn't make it back. Ochoa nodded once, then walked away. Inside the barracks that night, someone had drawn a caricature on the whiteboard. A stick-figure girl in glasses holding a giant map crying. The words, Tactical Princess, were scrawled above her in red. Reese saw it, folded her hands, then wiped the board clean. The next morning, during roll call, the instructor read out a commendation. Route Delta Bravo successfully executed with 0 simulated losses. Adjustments credited to civilian advisor Langford. No one applauded. But in the back, Malik crossed his arms and looked at her with something different in his posture. Respect. And something else. Like he was starting to remember her face. The armory echoed with the clack of metal and voices, thick with bravado. Trainees moved between rifle racks and supply crates, swapping parts, checking optics. Reese Langford stood near a side bench, sleeves rolled up, disassembling a jammed M17 pistol like she'd done it 100 times. Because she had. Lieutenant Briggs spotted her from across the room. He nudged one of his buddies, Corporal Dane, lean and sarcastic hand headed over with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Didn't know the wrench lady upgraded to firearms, Briggs said. Careful, you might scratch the finish. Reese didn't look up. She locked the slide into place, checked the chamber, and set the pistol down, perfectly aligned. Dane reached for the pistol mockingly. Let's see if it's still functional after her magical maintenance. Before he could touch it, Reese moved. Not fast, just precise. Her hand landed on the pistol first, her eyes rising to meet his. Don't touch my tools, she said quietly. Something in her voice measured, unblinking made Dane hesitate. Briggs chuckled. Relax, it's a toy. Not like she knows how to use one. The instructor entered then, cutting the tension. Weapon drills, everyone outside, long barrel proficiency test, followed by breakdown and reassembly under pressure. They filed out to the sun-bleached gravel behind the building. Each trainee was assigned a station. A table, a weapon, a clock. Reese didn't expect to be called, but then, Langford. She turned. The instructor tossed her a rifle. Slot 14, let's see what you've got. Some snickers rippled through the group. Briggs muttered, this'll be good. Reese stepped into place. The drill began. She moved like she'd rehearsed it in silence for years. Hands steady, motions fluid. Bolt, magazine, receiver. Firing pin laid out in precise sequence. Wiped, checked, reassembled. Time, 42.7 seconds. Only 2 trainees finished faster, but their rifles jammed on the follow-up function test. Hers didn't. Not a click, not a misfeed. The instructor raised an eyebrow. Where'd you learn that? Reese adjusted her grip. Nowhere worth remembering. The test moved to live fire. Each trainee had to hit 5 moving targets at 600 meters under simulated wind. Briggs hit 3. Dane missed 2. Reese's turn came. Someone whispered, don't trip over your wrench. She stepped forward. No posture change. No adjustment. She just raised the rifle and waited for the timer. The targets appeared gliding, shifting. She fired 5 times. All 5 targets dropped. Dead center. Silence. The instructor tapped his clipboard. Score. 5-5. Time, 11.9 seconds. Someone exhaled sharply. A British trainee at the edge of the group muttered under his breath, "That's Black Ridge level shooting." Reese lowered the rifle, locked the chamber open, and walked back to the bench without a word. Behind her, no one laughed. Not anymore. That night, a few of them gathered near the barracks fire pit. No jokes, no sneers, just quiet whispers. "Who is she? She moves like she's done this before." That kind of shooting hell, that's Ghost Protocol level. Inside, Reese cleaned the rifle one more time before setting it in its rack. Her hands were steady, her face unreadable. But under her sleeve, the tattoo itched. The broken sword, 7 notches beneath. Not decoration, not memory. A count. The sabotage started small. During a midday gear check, Reese opened her pack to find her tools missing, replaced with old, rusted spares that didn't even fit regulation bolts. No one looked up when she returned to the bench. No one offered an explanation. She just pulled out a cloth, wiped each one clean, and rewired the faulty comms terminal with them anyway. That afternoon, during a heat and load simulation, her name appeared on the logistics rotation unofficially. She was ordered to load crates onto the tactical transport while the rest of the unit watched from the shade. Corporal Dane leaned against a support beam, grinning. Got a break in the civilian strength somehow. Reese didn't respond. She hoisted the first crate heavier than listed and carried it without complaint. By the fourth, sweat soaked through her shirt, but her grip didn't falter. When one of the crates accidentally split open at her feet, spilling ration packs and gauze into the dust, no one helped. She picked them up, one by one, quietly. That night, in the tech bay, she caught Dragostaki, loud, always trying too hard, tampering with the weapon she just finished calibrating. He loosened a trigger screw, just enough to make it rattle. "Hey, Paper Tech," he said without looking. "You missed something." Reese stepped forward, fingers finding the screw instantly. She tightened it again, said nothing. Drago smirked. "Don't act like you're a soldier." "I'm not acting," she said. He leaned in close. "You don't belong here." Reese looked at him. "Then stop watching me." He blinked, but said nothing more. The next morning, during the field sim, Drago's weapon jammed during a contact sweep. His squad was pinned. The instructor blew the whistle, red with fury. "The same screw," the instructor barked. "Gone. What were you thinking?" Drago stammered. "Two checked it." "No." Langford checked it, the instructor growled. "And you tampered with it." There were no jokes after that. His squad refused to team with him again. Later, during comms drills, Reese was handed a radio unit with its frequency set half a click off. Her transmission didn't go through. But instead of panicking, she rewired the frequency manually and made the call. Another trainee, Hannah, known for her sharp tongue, rolled her eyes. "Little Miss Quiet just can't follow protocol, huh?" Reese looked up. "Attention to detail saves lives," she said flatly, then turned away. That evening, someone left a drawing on her bunk. Crude, in marker. Her face scribbled beside a crying wrench. Above it, the words, "Kalile code, more like clerk code." Reese stared at it for a long moment, then folded it and put it in her back pocket. Not out of sentiment, not even anger, but because one day, someone was going to ask what it took to survive, and she was going to answer with silence. Out near the perimeter, under the floodlights, Malik watched her walk by alone. He turned to Ochoa. "You notice something?" "What?" "No matter what they do, she never breaks pattern, never fights back. But somehow," he paused, "she wins every time." Ochoa said nothing, but her gaze followed Reese until she disappeared behind the barracks wall, a shadow moving steady, deliberate, like someone trained for far worse than heat, shame, or laughter. Someone they should have seen for who she was, but didn't. Not yet. It happened in the middle of a tactical review. Reese Langford stood at the edge of the projection room, arms crossed, face shadowed under low fluorescence. A new simulation map blinked on the screen. Urban siege, multi-unit response, layered civilian zones. The officers sat in rows, restless after a 14-hour rotation. The instructor was reviewing defensive bottlenecks when General Bernard Voss walked in. He moved slowly, a limp dragging slightly behind every step, the mark of some long-forgotten injury. His presence pulled the air out of the room. Even Briggs sat up straighter. Nobody noticed at first that Voss wasn't looking at the map. He was staring at Reese. "Langford," the instructor said. "You had suggestions last time. Got one now?" Reese didn't speak. She stepped forward, picked up a marker, and walked to the board. She began to draw not just routes, but fallback patterns, breach timings, medevac corridors. Her hands moved like she wasn't remembering something, but reliving it. Her voice didn't waver. "If the red team stages here," she said, circling a corridor, "they'll trap evac units under crossfire. You won't have time to relocate unless you already have a shadow route through the northwest drainworks." Murmurs rippled. General Voss stepped forward. His gaze had narrowed, jaw clenched. He wasn't watching the lines. He was watching her wrist. Her sleeve had slipped just slightly when she reached across the board. Just enough. A flash of ink. A broken sword, dark and weathered. 7 etched lines beneath it. Voss froze mid-step. His breath caught. The room stilled. He spoke softly, like someone had knocked the wind out of him. "That tattoo." Reese lowered the marker, turned. "It's not regulation," someone said under their breath. Voss ignored them. His eyes didn't move. "There was only one unit that used that mark," he said. "Only one." No one laughed now. "Echo 9, he added. "Black Protocol, Ember Gate." Silence dropped like a stone. Reese didn't deny it, didn't move. The instructor looked confused. "General, that op was sealed, terminated. No survivors." "There was one," Voss whispered. "One who radioed coordinates from inside a firestorm. One who killed with a broken sidearm and held a hallway while her entire team bled out behind her." He looked directly at Reese. "You were 23, just a tech. You weren't supposed to be on the strike team." Reese's eyes didn't leave his. "I didn't ask to be." Voss stepped closer. "Why the hell didn't you say who you were?" Reese looked past him, past all of them. "Because no one listens until someone bleeds in front of them." The instructor's clipboard hit the floor with a dull thunk. Briggs stood, arms loose at his sides. This is some kind of game?" Voss turned. "Does it look like a game, Lieutenant?" Briggs flinched. A moment later, the double doors opened again. 2 black SUVs pulled up outside. A man in a Defense Department suit stepped out. Dust curled behind his shoes. He carried a sealed dossier and handed it to Voss without a word. Voss flipped through it. His face hardened. "Effective immediately," he said, raising his voice. "Special Technical Advisor Sergeant Reese Langford is reinstated under wartime authority. She will oversee your next 2 training rotations." He turned to Reese. "We'll talk later, when you're ready." She gave a single nod. Voss left the room. The DoD official followed. The officers remained still. Some didn't breathe. Reese walked back to the bench. She picked up her notes, folded them. Briggs opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Pierre sat in the back, face pale. Malik stared at the floor. And Dragos? He left the room entirely. That night, no one messed with her gear. No one spoke her name behind her back. They didn't know how. In the mess hall, Ochoa sat across from her. Quietly. No words. Just presence. Reese took a sip of black coffee. Looked up. "They think it's about the tattoo," she said. "The kill count." Ochoa raised an eyebrow. "But it's not," Reese continued. "The sword broke during the first extraction attempt. The rest happened without it." She didn't explain further. She didn't have to. The next morning, she stood at the front of the formation. Her voice didn't rise, she didn't bark orders. But when she spoke, everyone listened. She pointed to maps, corrected stances, refined movement sequences. She touched no rifles, no rank on her chest. Yet not one of them dared speak over her again. At the edge of the training field, Voss watched her silently, hands behind his back. He didn't salute. He bowed his head just slightly, the way one does for the fallen. And for the ones who somehow survived, by the end of the week, the chalkboard in the tactical bay had changed. Gone were the crude drawings. Gone were the names scribbled in sarcasm and sharp marker. In their place, precise diagrams, clean lines, movement patterns, and at the center of them all Langford in block letters. Reese didn't ask to lead the training sessions, but after the general's order, no one questioned it. The first day she stepped into the instruction pit, a few of them, Briggs included, half expected her to gloat, to smile, to throw their words back at them. She didn't. She just picked up a piece of chalk and said, "Show me how you'd breach this room." Briggs blinked, confused. She looked at him again. "You're still standing, so teach me how you'd survive the first 4 seconds." He stepped forward slowly, hesitantly, drew a rough line. She corrected it with one stroke, adjusted the spacing. Didn't comment on his pride, just on the physics of shrapnel trajectories. And then she moved on. Over the next days, the mocking disappeared. Not because she demanded respect, but because she never acknowledged the absence of it. In the urban sim village, she showed them how to time movement between windows by listening for sound ricochet. During heat drills, she passed water down the line before they thought to ask. No rank, no orders, just presence. And slowly, the room started turning toward her before the instructor even called for suggestions. Ochoa began carrying a notebook just to record Langford's corrections. Malik reviewed footage of the sniper test and whispered to the others. She never flinched, even with crosswind. Even Pierre Quiet now asked if she could review his corner clearing form. Reese did. Once. Never raised her voice. Only once did she pause longer than normal. It was during a briefing on convoy strategy. She marked a red X across a narrow gulch. "Don't anchor your lead vehicle here," she said softly. "It funnels fire right to the rear axle." Someone asked why. She hesitated, then answered without looking up. "Because I left someone there, and I couldn't get them out." Silence. The questioner nodded and said nothing else. That evening, Reese stayed behind in the field shelter, alone, rechecking pressure seals on a breached medpack. Briggs entered quietly, for once without swagger, no friends behind him. He cleared his throat. "About before." She didn't look up. "I didn't know who you were," he said. "I know," she replied. "I shouldn't have." She held up a hand. "It doesn't matter," she said. "I'm not here to be remembered. I'm here so you make it out." He stood there for a second longer, then nodded once, and left. That night, someone left a folded note under her toolbox. No drawing, no insult, just 5 words in small block print. "Thanks for not breaking back." Reese held it for a moment, then tucked it next to the caricature she'd saved earlier. Not for vengeance. For contrast. The sun was just rising when Reese Langford packed her tools for the final time. No fanfare, no ceremony. Just the desert wind tugging at the corners of her shirt as she tightened the straps on her rucksack and stepped out onto the gravel path. Around her, the camp stirred with the quiet rhythm of routine. Boots hitting the dirt, distant radio checks, a whistle echoing near the range. But this morning felt different. As she walked past the motor pool, Malik stepped aside and nodded. Not the shallow kind they used to give each other in passing. This one was full, honest, grateful. Ochoa stood near the mess hall doors, a notebook still in hand. She didn't speak, just raised the pen slightly in a silent goodbye. Reese returned it with a single blink of recognition. Near the gate, a young recruit she'd never spoken to fell into step beside her. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "That you're from Embergate?" Reese didn't answer at first. Her boots continued to crunch across the gravel. Her gaze stayed fixed on the path ahead. Then she stopped, turned slightly. "It doesn't matter," she said. "What matters is what you do when it all falls apart." He frowned. "Like, when the plan breaks?" She shook her head. "No. When the people break. When the leadership fails. When the only map left is your instinct." He stared at her wrist, where the sleeve had slipped again. The broken sword. 7 notches. He looked like he wanted to ask more, but he didn't. Smart kid. At the checkpoint, General Voss waited. He stood with his hands behind his back, posture still sharp despite the limp. The wind tugged at the edge of his cap. His eyes gray and weather-worn watched her approach like a man seeing something both familiar and distant. "Langford," he said, "you didn't have to come back here. Not after what they did." "I didn't come back for them," she replied. "I came back for the ones who would have never survived without knowing what we lost." He nodded, slow. "You're not asking for anything, are you?" No, she said. Not even a record correction. Some truths don't belong in ink. Voss hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small case. Inside was a single metal tarnished, unmounted, stripped of citation. Your original commendation, he said. It was never awarded, buried with the files. She looked at it, then closed the case and handed it back. I don't need it, she said. They listened. That's enough. He didn't press. Just gave a faint smile, one of those rare things that carries weight not because of how wide it is, but how long it took to earn. Reese passed through the gates alone. No one followed. No one called after her. But the silence behind her was different now. Not avoidance. Reverence. Some watched her go with awe. Some with guilt. Some with the quiet ache of having learned too late who stood beside them. She didn't look back. Because people like her don't return for applause. They return for closure. For unfinished instructions. For the next soldier to carry something better than what they carried. And somewhere behind her, scratched into the chalkboard in one of the old war rooms, someone had written her words. It's not the sword that kills. It's the will that stays when the sword breaks. Reese Langford's story reminds us that true strength often moves in silence. In a world that worships loud victories and visible rank, there are still those who serve in the shadows who carry not medals, but memories, not fame, but quiet skill. She didn't need to shout to be heard. She didn't need revenge to earn respect. What made her powerful wasn't the broken sword tattoo on her wrist, but the unbroken will beneath it. She endured every insult, every humiliation not to prove others wrong, but to stay ready when it mattered most. This story is for anyone who's ever been underestimated, for the ones who carry more than they show, for those whose value isn't seen until silence is the only thing holding the room together. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more narratives like this. And drop a comment below. What part of Reese's journey hit you hardest? Have you ever been labeled something you knew wasn't true? Let's keep sharing stories that remind us. You don't need to be loud to be legendary.